The oppressive Tampa heat of October 1990 hung thick and wet, a perpetual shroud that clung to everything. It permeated the sun-baked asphalt of suburban streets, seeped into the pastel stucco of modest homes, and settled deep in the lungs. For Sarah Jenkins, a mother of two, the humidity was a constant companion, a familiar weight she carried through her days. Sarah was 34, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and a resilience born of juggling a part-time job at the Sunshine Diner with the demands of raising her two children, Emily, 10, and David, 6. Her life was a tapestry woven from routine. The pre-dawn scramble to get the kids ready for school, the clatter and sizzle of the diner's kitchen, the hurried grocery runs, the endless piles of laundry, and the precious, fleeting moments of quiet spent reading a worn paperback after the kids were finally asleep. Her husband, Mark, worked long hours as a forklift operator at a distribution warehouse down by the port, a job that provided for their family, but often left him bone-weary and distant. Their marriage, like many, had its currents and eddies, moments of frustration punctuated by deep affection. Sarah often felt like the fulcrum, balancing the household, the children's needs, and Mark's sometimes volatile moods. The Sunshine Diner, with its perpetually steaming coffee pots and the aroma of stale grease and syrup, was Sarah's second home. She knew the regulars by name, their orders by heart. Mr. Henderson always took his coffee black, 2 sugars, with the morning paper. Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired nurse, always ordered the same blueberry pancakes, no butter. Sarah enjoyed the camaraderie, the brief human connections that punctuated her long shifts. It was honest work, and the tips, though never lavish, helped. She dreamed of going back to community college, perhaps studying early childhood education, but those dreams felt distant, eclipsed by the immediate necessities of daily life. On Wednesday, October 3, 1990, the day began like any other. Emily and David were bickering over a cereal box toy at breakfast. Sarah, with a weary but loving sigh, mediated the dispute, packed their lunches, and ushered them out the door for their walk to Sulphur Springs Elementary. The sun was already a fierce presence in the sky, promising another scorching day. She spent the morning cleaning, running errands, and then headed to the diner for her afternoon shift. At the Sunshine Diner, the afternoon rush was steady. She refilled coffee cups, delivered plates piled high with burgers and fries, and exchanged pleasantries. Around 8:30 p.m., as the diner wound down, Sarah clocked out, her feet aching, her mind already drifting to the next day's to-do list. She waved goodbye to Brenda, another waitress, and stepped out into the humid Tampa night. The air was still thick, but a faint breeze offered a meager reprieve. She usually walked the mile and a half home, cutting through a quieter residential street, sometimes catching the bus if her shift ended later or if she was particularly tired. Tonight she chose to walk, needing the cool-down, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. Mark came home around 10:30 p.m. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the old window unit air conditioner struggling against the heat. He expected to find Sarah reading on the porch swing or already asleep. The porch swing was empty. Her book lay on the nightstand, open to a dog-eared page. Her purse wasn't on the kitchen counter where she usually dropped it. A knot of unease began to tighten in his stomach. He called Brenda at the diner, who confirmed Sarah had left hours ago. He called a few of her friends, her sister, but no one had seen her since that afternoon. Panic began to set in. Mark walked the short route from the diner to their home, calling her name into the still night, his voice hoarse with growing fear. He checked the overgrown lot beside their house, the small park a few blocks away. Nothing. Returning home, he called the Tampa Police Department. The initial response was tempered. "She's an adult, Mr. Jenkins. She likely just went out. Give it 24 hours. He argued, pleaded, but was told to wait. The night stretched into an agonizing eternity. He sat on the sofa, staring at the phone, imagining 1,000 scenarios, each one worse than the last. He tried to rationalize, to believe she'd simply needed space, a moment to herself. But Sarah wasn't like that, not without telling someone, not without a note, not without a call. The next morning, the police officially took a missing person report. Officers arrived at their modest home, their faces somber under the harsh Florida sun. They asked questions, the same questions Mark had already asked himself 100 times. Had she been unhappy? Was there another man or another woman? Financial troubles, arguments. Mark recounted their last conversation, a mundane discussion about overdue bills, a slight disagreement about discipline for David. Nothing that would explain a vanishing act. The initial investigation felt both frantic and frustratingly slow. Flyers with Sarah's smiling face were distributed throughout Tampa, her description broadcast on local news channels. 5 feet 4 inches tall, brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing her diner uniform, a pale yellow polo shirt and dark slacks. Local volunteers organized search parties, combing parks, drainage ditches, and undeveloped tracts of land around their neighborhood. Mark, exhausted and grief-stricken, joined every search, his voice raw from calling her name, his eyes constantly scanning, hoping to catch a glimpse of her familiar stride. Emily and David, too young to fully grasp the grim reality, became quiet, their childhood innocence slowly eroding under the crushing weight of their mother's absence. Emily kept asking when Mommy would come home, her voice a fragile whisper that tore at Mark's heart. David clung to his father, his big eyes mirroring Mark's own unspoken terror. Weeks turned into months, the leads dwindled, the initial flurry of media attention faded. The police investigated every tip, every sighting, but each one led to a dead end. A witness claimed to have seen a woman matching Sarah's description getting into an older model, dark-colored sedan near the diner that night, but the detail was too vague, the description too common. There were no surveillance cameras in that part of town in 1990, no cell phone records to trace, no digital footprints to follow. The limited forensic tools of the era meant that unless there was a direct crime scene, a clear piece of evidence, or a confession, cases like Sarah's often became cold quickly. The detectives assigned to the case, weary and overworked, would call Mark periodically, their voices tinged with regret, always the same message. "We're still looking, Mark, we haven't forgotten her." But the calls grew less frequent, the hope more elusive. The Jenkins family struggled. Mark worked extra shifts, trying to fill the void Sarah had left, but the house felt empty, silent. He cooked, he cleaned, he helped with homework, doing his best to be both mother and father, but the grief was a heavy cloak he couldn't shed. Emily, once a bright and outgoing child, became withdrawn, her grades slipping. David regressed, often having nightmares. The community rallied initially, bringing meals, offering support, but over time, the practicalities of life moved on. Sarah Jenkins became a missing person, a face on a flyer that slowly yellowed and faded in the relentless Florida sun. Her story was told in hushed tones, a local tragedy, a cautionary tale. Mark moved their family to a smaller apartment a year later, unable to bear the memories that haunted every corner of their old home. He kept Sarah's photo prominently displayed, a constant reminder, a silent promise that he would never give up. Years crawled by, the children grew. Emily, now a teenager, carried a quiet sorrow, a deep-seated fear that her mother's disappearance was somehow her fault, or that she hadn't remembered enough details about that last morning. David, still young, had fragmented memories of his mother, piecing together a ghostly image from old photographs and the stories Mark told. Mark, for his part, became a shadow of his former self, burdened by loss, suspicion, and the gnawing uncertainty of not knowing. He attended support groups for families of missing persons, his face etched with a permanent grief, his eyes scanning every new face, every new lad, clinging to the faint hope that one day he would finally have answers. The Tampa Police Department's cold case unit would occasionally review Sarah's file, but without new evidence, it remained dormant, a thick binder gathering dust on a shelf. Then, 12 years after Sarah Jenkins vanished into the humid Tampa night, the relentless march of progress brought an unexpected, chilling discovery. It was June 2002. Just a few miles east of where the Jenkins family had once lived, in a rapidly developing area near the intersection of US-301 and US-4, a new retail park was under construction. What was once a sprawling, wild tract of palmetto scrub, pine trees, and cypress wetlands, undeveloped land that had remained untouched for decades, was being cleared. Heavy machinery roared across the landscape, tearing away dense vegetation, churning up the earth. On a sweltering Tuesday morning, a bulldozer operator named Miguel Rodriguez was pushing earth to grade a section for a new parking lot. His machine suddenly snagged on something unusual, something that felt different from roots or rocks. He stopped, climbed down, and walked to the spot. What he saw sent a jolt of icy dread through him, despite the blistering heat. Partially exposed from the freshly disturbed soil were fragments of bone. He immediately called his supervisor, who in turn called the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. The construction site quickly became a crime scene. Detectives, forensic anthropologists, and crime scene technicians descended upon the area. The soil was meticulously excavated, revealing a shallow grave. What they found were human skeletal remains, badly degraded by the passage of time and the corrosive Florida soil, but undeniably human. Among the bones, a few personal effects were discovered. the remains of what appeared to be a woman's purse, its contents long since deteriorated into dust and muck, and a small, distinctive silver locket, tarnished but still recognizable. The locket was engraved with two tiny, interlocking hearts. The discovery immediately resonated with the cold case files. Missing persons reports stretching back decades were cross-referenced. The locket, in particular, was a critical piece of evidence. Through meticulous police work and interviews with Sarah's family, it was confirmed to be identical to one Mark had given Sarah on their 5th wedding anniversary, a cherished gift she wore almost every day. Dental records provided the final, heartbreaking confirmation. The remains belonged to Sarah Jenkins. The news hit Mark like a physical blow. 12 years of agonizing uncertainty had finally ended, but the closure was brutal. Emily, now 22, and David, 18, received the news with a mixture of profound sorrow and a strange, somber relief. Their mother was finally found. She was gone, but she was no longer just a ghost, a question mark. She had a final resting place. The investigation, now revitalized, faced new challenges. 12 years had passed. The landscape had changed. Witnesses were harder to find, memories had faded, and any potential evidence at the burial site was severely compromised by the elements and construction activity. Yet forensic science had advanced significantly since 1990. The skeletal remains underwent detailed examination. While no cause of death could be definitively determined from the bones alone due to the degradation, the circumstances of the shallow grave pointed unequivocally to foul play. There were no signs of a struggle at the immediate burial site, suggesting Sarah might have been killed elsewhere and then covertly moved. Detectives revisited Mark Jenkins. He had been a suspect in the initial investigation, as is common in spousal disappearances. He willingly cooperated, his grief palpable. His alibi for the night of Sarah's disappearance, while circumstantial and lacking independent witnesses, had always remained consistent. He had been at work. The police had found no evidence to link him to Sarah's vanishing or to the eventual discovery site. His emotional state, his dedication to finding Sarah, and the lack of any subsequent troubling behavior or flight risk over 12 years gradually shifted the focus elsewhere. The locket, though, offered a faint glimmer of hope in a sea of unknowns. It was carefully processed, hoping for any DNA evidence or fingerprints, but the decades in the earth exposed to the elements had left it mostly clean. However, the locket was a key identifier, allowing the police to move from a missing person to a homicide case. Investigators theorized that Sarah, walking home, had likely encountered someone, perhaps an opportunist or someone she knew. The location of her burial, a then remote, undeveloped area, suggested the perpetrator had knowledge of the local terrain and sought to dispose of her body, where it would likely remain undiscovered. The renewed investigation combed through old reports, re-interviewed Brenda from the Sunshine Diner, and anyone who had been working or living near the diner or Sarah's walking route in 1990. They looked for individuals with a history of violence against women in the area, particularly those who might have had access to or knowledge of that specific undeveloped land. The process was painstaking, a race against the ever-fading light of memory and fragmented evidence. The very remoteness that had kept Sarah hidden for so long now made the task of finding her killer even more daunting. The discovery of Sarah Jenkins' remains brought a painful, partial closure to her family, a definitive answer to the question of her fate. She was finally laid to rest, her children and husband able to grieve at her grave, a place to visit, a tangible symbol of her memory. But the question of who had taken her and why remained agonizingly open. The Tampa Police Department vowed to continue their investigation, to pursue every lead, however faint, every piece of technology, however new. The case of Sarah Jenkins moved from a missing person file to an active cold case homicide, a testament to the enduring hope that even after 12 long years, justice might still find its way through the relentless heat and shadows of Tampa, Florida. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the countless unsolved mysteries that haunt communities, a silent testament to lives irrevocably altered by moments of terror and the passage of time. The search for answers, though arduous and frustrating, would continue, driven by the lingering echoes of a mother's vanished life.